NAT. Now, guys, NAT is one of the main important protocol in networking. It's very, very crucial. Who knows when internet came about? Do you know any history about internet? When did the internet came about? You cannot be a network engineer and you have no idea about what you are doing. Internet is networking, guys. So when did the internet came about? What is Peter Wise? Do you know when internet came about?
Prof, thank you so much. I did read something small, but it's difficult to
let's know what you know. So my question is, okay, what was the first name for internet? When did it come about, and what was the first name for internet?
I don't know.
You don't know? Wow, that is not good, guys. You are network engineers. You are networking. So internet came about in 1970. It came with a name called ARPANET. That was how internet was known. It was decommissioned in 1990 to give birth to internet. Okay, so when we had internet in those days, we have just a single IP address. There was nothing like private IP address, public IP address. We didn't have anything like that. So everybody was communicating with single IP address. And of course, it was IP version 4. But IP version 4 has nothing to do with private IP address and public IP address. But IP version 4 can only give you 4.3 billion. So from 1993 going, you could see that a lot of people were using internet and the IP address was running out. And that gave birth to the protocol we are going to do, NAT. That they got to know that, okay, so with the way IP address are being used and with the way a lot of people are using this protocol, this internet service, there will be a time where a lot of people run out of IP address because only one person, like Peter Wise in your house, you alone, you are using IP address for your phone, you are using IP address for your computer, you are using IP address for your TV. What else are you using in your house which uses IP address? So one single person, you end up using so many IP address. So imagine, look at the population we have now. If everybody is using IP address, it's a big deal. So and now we have so many devices on the internet. So of course, if NAT didn't come about, I'm not sure internet would be working now. So NAT came about for us to have the division of private IP address and what public IP address. Those who have been doing interviews, I don't know if you have been asked with this question. RF, I think it's RF 1998. Is it 19? Yes, 1918. Have you ever been asked to give IP address of this? What are the RF 1918 private IP address? Whoever has had this interview question before. RCF 1918 private IP address. Nobody have been asked that before. If they talk about that, they are talking about what you know, class A, class B, class C. So don't get confused. This is the document that brought private IP address about. So sometimes in an interview, instead of the person going straight to private IP address, can you give me examples of RFC 1918 private IP address? Don't be confused because of this word. This RFC, you shouldn't be confused. It's still talking about class A, class B, class C IP address. So NAT brought this concept of having a private IP address and what? A public IP address. That was the main reason why we have what? NAT. Because with NAT, then the issue will be resolved. Yes. So to go back to what I was saying, so the NAT was the reason why we had what? Private IP address, and from 2004 and more popular in 2011. all devices. You buy a router, they've enabled it by default, or they've enabled it automatically. So you come to your house, you connect some of the routers you buy from home, and then you have internet access, because all those routers have NAT features in them for us to be able to go to the internet. So this is very, very important in the industry, and it's very important to you as a network engineer. And then NAT is always configured on the edge device. Okay, so you are going to have NAT being configured on the edge device. So the edge device could be a router, it could be a firewall, and mostly firewall and routers is what is more important. So you have to take note of that. And when we talk of NAT, what does it mean? So all it means is that because you cannot, you want to keep, so what it means is that company A can have as many as 4.3 billion devices. Now, when you want to talk to the internet, you need only one public IP address to be able to talk to what? To the internet. And that has been a game changer for to conserve all the IP addresses that we all have. So this is something you might do as a project, or it's something that you might apply as a new configuration, or most often, if you are managing the firewall, this configuration will be done already, and you might not need to do anything else. Or maybe there are days that I will show you as we are going through the classes. You might have to enable certain network to be able to have access to the internet. So when we talk of NAT, it's all giving you access to the internet. How does it give you access to the internet? Because our home devices, our computers, our phones, or even if you are working, every device you have is going to use a private IP address. That private IP address is not routable on the internet. So if it's not routable on the internet, how does your PC talk to the internet? Your PC need a protocol called NAT. What it means is that when your private IP address hits your firewall or hits your router, depending on what the situation or your design is, it's going to translate that IP address and give you a public IP address that will allow you to communicate to anywhere you want to communicate to. So when we talk of NAT, it's just translations of IP addresses. And what it means is that if your company is using public IP address, then you don't need NAT. And most of the government companies, I've seen it. I don't know if any of you can give me, if you have it on your environment, but mostly the government companies or the security agencies, most of them have public IP address. And I think it's more about either, how do you call it? There is this history that some people did not release their public IP address when NAT came about. So they still have the public IP address, so they didn't release it. So some of the old universities, let me find out from Peter Wise. Your school, were you using public or you were using private? Or you don't know? No, I mean your internal devices, your computers, and are they having public or private IP address?
Your private.
Okay, so some of the old universities, some of the government agencies, they still have public, all their internal devices are public IP address. So if you have a public IP address, then you don't need NAT, because the only thing NAT will do is to allow you to what? Communicate on the internet. So if you have internal IP, which is public IP address, this configuration is not needed. So I'm sure you all get it. Is there anybody who has a public IP address in your company, so that I'll get to understand your design structure? Is there anybody here? Okay, but I've seen some of my old students who are using what public IP address in their how do you call it, in their company. So just for us to get an understanding, this NAT is just network address translation. All it will be doing is to translate your address. It does nothing. And why is it doing so? What is the need for this protocol? Because the private IP address will not work on the internet. That is the reason why you need this. So that is key for us to know. So for that reason, these are the benefits. This can be an interview questions. And guys, if you're a firewall guy, I'm going to give you interview questions on firewall as well. So when you are going for interviews, you'll be able to handle some of the interview questions they normally ask on firewall. But these are the things you have to know. NAT provides security and privacy. How does it provide security and privacy? Because people on the internet will not see your internal IP address, because it will be translated. So you have that privacy and you have that security. So also NAT in a way also give us that benefit, apart from the concept of making a private and public. So if not private and public, we don't need NAT. So if you all, a time will come, I don't know when, because now NAT is working fine. By the time will come, if IP version 4, version 6 becomes popular, then we don't need NAT, because NAT only translates. The IP version 6 can allow you to talk to the internet, and then you don't need to give burden on your router with the protocol of NAT in terms of translating. So that is also one of the things that if it comes, we will not need that. But for now, it's still useful. And then there's this concept of parts also making it possible for we to use NAT for a very long time. So we have to stick to what is more relevant and not worry ourselves with syllables because of IP version 6. So I'm not going to handle anything IP version 6. We are going to do purely for IP version 4, as I spoke about. But this is one of the benefits. It also gives you flexibility. Flexibility in the sense that you can choose anything you want. So NAT has different types, which we are going to go through. And then you can also scale out the way you want, and also in a way help you to communicate faster. NAT also allow individuals or organizations to have cost effectiveness and simple connection. What does it mean? If you have NAT on your environment, a company can have just one public IP address and they will be able to go to the internet. Now, every public IP address is not free. It's something you have to buy, and it's very expensive. So if you have a protocol that allows you to use one public IP address for all your 10,000 users, your 20,000 users in your company to have access to the internet, then that is cost benefit. So that is one of the benefits. So these are the critical benefits of NAT that I want all of us to know. So right now, you have to understand what NAT is, why we need NAT, what devices we configure NAT on, why is it critical, what are the benefits. That is what I've spoken about. So in an interview, you can be asked, you are a firewall engineer, you are a security person, what do you understand about NAT? What is the benefit? Why do we need NAT? Why is NAT even relevant? So if NAT is not there, internet will be down. Internet will not work anymore, because now we have we have over 20 million devices on the internet, and that will not be possible for you to have that to work. Yes, Kenneth.
Rob, can I also say it helps conserve IP address?
Yes, it's also true. So it helps to conserve the IP address. In fact, let me also add that one. That is.
It was part of.
That is also true.
One of my interviews, they asked me this question, and then I gave like this benefit that he gave, and the guy also said he needs one key statement, and he added that one. That's why I wanted to.
Yeah, because it's the conservation that brought up this protocol. In actual sense, it's because of conservation that brought up. We want to conserve IP address. That was the reason for this. So that one I can't agree with him more. Yes, I think I missed that aspect. Yes, so it's also part of the benefits of NAT. Okay, so now we all understand this aspect. So now let's go through the types. So those are the three main types. So as I said, these are things you do on the firewall, because firewall is the device that gives you access to the internet. So NAT will always be configured on the firewall. You can't have any firewall without NAT, unless you are using it for transparent mode, which would be just for monitoring or whatever. But If you are using it in a routed mode and you want it to route IP addresses and all that, then you are going to require what? NAT. It's a must. So we have a static, we have dynamic, and we have what? Port address translation. Now, static is not commonly used. I gave one instances. We are going to go through all of them, but this is not commonly used because it's 1:1. So if you have so many devices on your internal side, or even if it's DMZ, you have so many devices there. So why will you go for 1:1 where you cannot do anything much? So this is not normally used. Now there is a situation like this. Let's say you have a web server somewhere on your DMZ. You always want to communicate to a partner, or you want to communicate to some vendors. Then you can do 1:1 because that IP address can never change, and that will be the only route they can be able to communicate to this device. So that is the concept about static. It's 1:1. And then when we talk of dynamic, it's many to many. But dynamic is very expensive to use in real life. Very, very expensive because, as I told you, public IP address are not for free. You have to buy them, you have to own them, and nobody can own them. So for that reason, if you go for dynamic, what it means is that if you have 10 IP address, which are public IP address, you can map it to 10 devices. Now, if you have 11 devices, now the 11th one cannot communicate, the packet will drop because there is no public IP address for it to map. So imagine if you are using it for your internal devices. The internal devices, if you have 5,000 devices, then you need 5,000 public IP address. So this is also not what? Common practice, because you need, for every packet to go to the internet, it needs to be translated to an IP address if you are using the dynamic what? NAT. So that is also not commonly practiced. But you can have a situation where you have a fixed number of DMZ IP address, and then for that reason, you want to get the benefit of NAT for security, for proxy services. So because of that, you give a pool of, let's say, certain number of IP address, which I've worked in environments like that. So all our DMZ IP address had a pool of /24 because we were using about 200 DMZ service for that company. So it was more useful. But if you have a company where they are dealing with more interaction outside, you cannot use that protocol for it to work. So this, it's also not commonly practiced, but we are going to do examples of companies that I'm talking about, how it's implemented and how it's configured in that situation. But the common one we all see most often is this, which is the part, which is port address translation. So for this one, all you need is one public IP address. Then you are good to go. So let me bring this topology we are going to use for the class today to explain that. So like this one, every device that you are going to have here, whatever. So like, let's say in our real life, we have so many devices. You just need one public IP address. So everybody going there will be using the IP address to communicate. So in the end effect, all those people here cannot see what your private IP address are, which is very good. So NAT is really a security protocol, which acts like a proxy server. So proxy server, the main concept is to be able to disguise the internal IP address. And NAT can do that for you, okay? So that is one of the benefits. So our part is something that I'm going to take my time to give you all the possible scenario we have in real life. And sometimes you can see that some devices internally cannot go to the internet. You are going to see some of the reason. It could be that they are not part of the access group that is allowed to use what? NAT. And that is the reason why they don't have what? Access to the internet. And sometimes in your day-to-day activities, you can also get a project where they want you to create a new network, but they don't want it to be accessible to the internet. And then you have to know that you have to exclude that network from your NAT configuration. So all those possible scenarios, we are going to go through that as well, okay? But there is one major thing as engineers we have to know. So I normally don't waste my time when I'm doing network. twisting network, but for firewall guys, you have to know more about port numbers. So look at it this way. Anytime, let's say, let's assume that this is a web server, and please pay attention. If you get this understanding well, firewall will be very easy for you. Because look, your firewall is controlling traffic, controlling applications. Okay, that is the main thing. You have a network, you put services on it, and that services, you manage it, you manage them by the firewall. But you need to understand port as well to be able to manage them. How does the port comes in? Let's say this is our DMZ service, okay? And let's say somebody, or let's say even your internal, or let me say your outside world, they want to have access to some of your web application. Now, when they are coming, they will hit your firewall. But what are they coming with? They will come for IP. They will come with an IP address. So let's say public IP address. So let's say 11.11. Let's say 10. Let's say 4. Okay. Now, what is the purpose of IP address? What do you think is the purpose? You are a network engineer. Why do we need IP address on our environment? What is the main purpose? Yes, I know, don't use this one. I know IP address allow communication. I know it, don't say that one. There is one significant reason why IP address is needed. Yes, Kojo, I realize your mic was off. Or the answer is gone. Or you were going to say the same thing.
No. So you're asking the significance of an IP address?
Yes.
That's a header for a packet. So you're routing it, right? Layer 3.
Okay, why do you need a header? What role is the header doing?
For your route.
No. That is not the main reason why we need IP address. Yes, Kenneth.
Identification.
Very good. Identification, and what is the identification? Identification per location. That is the main reason why we need IP. If not, there is no need. So the moment you are browsing something, the IP address is looking for the location of the service you are browsing. So let's say somebody design a web here, which is, let's say, www.com, okay? Whatever the thing will be. And give the IP address to be, let's say, okay, so DMZ can be public, it can be private, but let's say it's 10 dot something. Now, if this device want to communicate to this one, because of this IP address, the packet will be looking for this IP address. It hits the firewall. The firewall say, oh yeah, I know where to take you to. This is the location. Because the IP address have given the location to be on the DMZ or to be on the internal network. Or let's say somebody outside want to go to google.com. The moment you browse your google.com, the google.com will translate to your private IP address. Then once it translates to the private IP address, it gets to the firewall. The firewall translates it also to public IP address. Then it will be looking for google.com server to give you that information. But when it's looking for, it's going because of the IP address. So with that IP address, you can't identify anything. You can't, in fact, you can't identify services. You can't identify computers on your network. You cannot identify anything. So that is very important. So I want you to get the idea that the IP address, the main significance of it is to help you to identify locations of service. Service is what is, if it's google.com, it's going to find where google.com server is. Is the thing. So the moment you browse google.com, you're just looking for where you can get google.com from. And then google.com, because it has its own IP address based on the web page, would then be able to tell you I'm here. And then the firewall, when you get to the internet will route it to where google.com is. Are you all getting the idea of what I'm saying? But when it gets to the google.com server, let's say this is the server, the IP address duty is done. It doesn't do anything. There is nothing the IP address can do again. it hits the server. That is why I'm saying that in networking, when you are working, you ask them, can you ping? If they say they can ping, you are done. But firewall, not only ping. Pinging is not, if you're a firewall engineer, pinging is not the answer alone. Because this IP need a port number. So this IP need a port number. And why do you think we need a port number? The port number identifies the application. So let me give you this basic idea to keep in your mind. IP address identifies the location of servers, PCs, or network devices. Port numbers, and so let's say you can have this server with so many applications. When the cat get to this server, because you've allowed with port 80, is going to look for what application works with port 80. Are you all getting what I'm saying? If we get with a different port, when it gets to the server will also have logical operation to know that, okay, I see the packet, it has port 23, this is or port 25, this is where the application is. Then it gives you access to the application. So IP address identify the location of the server, the printers, or whatever. So once they're able to identify, so as a network engineer, once you identify the PC, you don't worry yourself much with the ports. But firewall, because you open ports, is one of your basic requirements. And that is why I said POR. I'm surprised those who are working you've not heard, because it's a common terminology in the working industry. POR, port open request, is one of the common requests. So what it means is that, yes, we allow you packet, but what port do you want to communicate? Because I don't want you to get access to this server and be able to deal with everything. So let's say this is Google or Facebook server. They might have certain application that they don't want you to talk to. So for that reason, when it gets here, they have to know what port you want to work with. And also understand this thing. When we talk of application and services, who can tell me what it means? I'm taking my time to break this down, because if you don't understand this logic, you cannot deal with any issues on firewall. That is why I want you to, yes, we've done IP address, but I want to bring your mind on what is the main purpose for the IP address. And also I want to bring your mind on why do we need port numbers. So the IP is to identify location. The port is to identify applications, resources, or services, now, or what you call systems. So when we talk of application and services, what does it mean? Who can tell me what it means? So that I don't assume in my head that you know it and I'm deceiving, I'm just enjoying myself alone. What does services and application mean? You can't tell me and nobody knows that. Then what are you doing in the food? What is, when you say service, what does it mean?
The actual work is supposed to be done.
The actual work is supposed to be doing. That is the services. So when what is the name? Abankwa, you provide service. You are a service engineer. That is more like your work. What service do you do? Can you tell us what services it is? The work that the service is supposed to do is to monitor what? Is it to monitor the patient heart or which one? Heartbeat?
Every part of the patient.
Every part of the patient.
Yes.
Wow. So guys, we all have to think of bringing our case up to design applications. So we have to think about that.
Hello, Prof. Can you
What
hear
service?
me?
Yes, we can hear you. What do you, when you go to the hospital, what do you do? What kind of service do you provide?
So we provide patient monitoring solutions for the hospitals.
So are you guys getting the idea? So the main service, the work that the service is supposed to do is to monitor what? Is it to monitor the patient heart or which one? Heartbeat?
Every part of the patient.
Every part of the patient.
Yes.
Wow. So guys, we all have to think of bringing our case up to design applications. We have to think about that because anytime I get to this point, I feel it's a call to duty, which means that we have to design our case to be able to not to be like us. We are just using somebody like somebody. I was teaching network and somebody asked me some question that why do I have to configure host name and not something else? And I told him that, you know what, go and bring Kujo routers and tell us that we shouldn't configure host name, but we should configure spectacle name. Then the name will work and everybody will be okay. But you cannot ask me that question because I'm not the one who designed the command line. I'm not the one who designed that software. So I wouldn't be able to know that. But we all have to. So one day I was watching, I think the guy was about 12 years or so. He designed so many apps. And the guy was saying something that really hits me. He said that, look, when you are a kid and you want to train your kid to go and play soccer, you know where to go. Is that not correct? When you want your kid to play basketball, you know where to go. When you want your kid to be a musician, you know where to go. But when you want your kid to provide service in future, where do they go? Who knows the answer? Where would they go? You think it's the school? The school is teaching them to provide service for the future? Is that where? So what happens? I don't know if you guys are getting the idea of what I'm saying. So it's bound to us to find a way of grooming our children not to be like us. And the way that will work is on applications. And just as Alex said, he said, well, I want to use your right word. I love that one. He said application or services is what?
The actual work is supposed to be done.
Yes, or how to do something. You have to design a service on how to do something. And we have to, how are we going to groom our children? And that is why you can see that somebody said that if you look at Africa, all the rich people did not become rich because they used their head. Who in, from let's say me, even maybe in my country, I have one of your core responsibility is that you are going to make sure how the services of the company are going to work. That is one of your core mandate. In fact, that is the reason why you need firewall. That your services should be managed by people who are, your service should be given to people who are supposed to get. Your service should be controlled. It should be in the way that it's supposed to be. Now, that brings to my next question. So when we talk of application and services, how do they work? Who can tell me how they work? So now we know, first of all, we know that application is meant of doing something. Now, how is that application of doing something going to work on the internet or on the network? How do they work on the network? Are you guys getting the direction of my question? So you know, okay, which example will I give? Okay, let me give one that we all know. Let's say Facebook.com. How is that application working on the internet? Internet is also a network. Don't think the internet is different from what you have. You have internet, extranet, and intranet. They are all network. So my question is, how does Facebook work? Who can tell me? How do we enjoy Facebook? It's an application, but how do we get it? Yes, Collins. Collins, I'm not seeing your face.
It responds to requests. So a user sitting anywhere is going to send in a request, and that means the application on the other side has to.
So that one I get
feedback.
That the request I get that. That is not what. How are you able to get Facebook? Okay, let's say for example, on my computer, how do I get Facebook?
You have to use the domain name. You request using the domain name, which is translated into the IP.
And if I get a domain name, how do I use the domain name?
You have to go to the web browser and you put in the domain name and then you send the request.
Yes, that is the word. Facebook work on web base. So in application form, you are either going to have the application working on web. So if you talk of www.com, it's a web. This is not internet. Do you know somebody asked me this question some time ago? Is www.com internet? This is not an internet. It's the way it works on the internet. So in terms of application, you have application working on web. And if I talk of web, just as he said, you get a domain in facebook.com, you put it on your browser and it's working. So when you are working, all the applications you are going to enable are either going to work on web or there's the second part we are coming to go. Now, if it's working on this web, it goes with only 2 port numbers. So it's either going to browse, it's going to be port 80 or it's going to be port 443. So these are going to be common port because now web application is work friendly. So a lot of application developers are developing application based on web based. Are you all getting, guys? This concept is very important before we start the NAT configuration. So I want to, because the way I'm even asking questions and what you are answering tells me that yes, we have the idea, but we really don't know what is happening. We really don't know. And if you don't know what is happening, you can't be a good engineer in that concept. So if you are enabling this port, it means that it's going to work on web base. Now, if the application is not working on web base, then how is it working? Who can tell me? What else is it working? So, for example, if I have Facebook on my phone, it's not working on web base because I don't browse Facebook on the phone to be able to work. Are you all getting the concept of what I'm saying? So how is the Facebook working on my phone as compared to when I open it on the computer? They don't work in the same format. On the Facebook, it's working differently. On the computer, it's working when I browse. So on the, I say on the computer, on the phone, it's working. Who can tell me how the phone is working? And it's one of the ways you're also going to have on computers. So computers will either work in a web-based format or like how I'm having it on my phone. So on the phone, how is it working?
Is it hosted or hosting?
No.
Through an application?
Say that one again.
Through an application.
So the application is the main thing, but I'm talking of how users are able to access it. Now, users are going to be able to access it. We all know if you browse facebook.com, but you on your phone, you don't browse it. So how are you able to? So yes, you have an app you have installed on your phone, but why do you think on your phone the app is able to work? You have to be able to know that. Why do you think? Yes, you install. You go to Apple Store, you get the application, then you install it on your phone. But how is it able to work? It's not the phone which is making the Facebook to work. It's not your phone. There is mechanism that is making it to work. Yes, go ahead.
So it's a package.
No. Who can tell me?
It's like a software, right?
As a service.
Everyone knows it's a software, but why is it working? Why is the software working in isolation?
Oh, like you're talking about APIs? Like,
wow. So you see, we've not questioned what we know. We've not questioned. But do you know why we don't? Do you know why we don't question things we know?
It looks like
yes, Collins, go ahead.
is hosting the application.
say that again, Prof.
The phone will be. All right.
Yeah,
so
one at a time. So Collins, you were on the phone. You were on the. You were talking. So let's hear you.
So the phone will be hosting the client-based application. So just like you may have an application hosted somewhere else. So here the phone is having some kind of that application, and all it will need is to communicate to the server on the other side.
Very good. There is a client and a server. That is how applications work. That is the term you were missing. Applications are going to work if you can either install the client version. The moment you do installation, then it means that you have a client version. But that client version alone will not work. Meaning that if the server is down, the Facebook will be down. So if Facebook server that we are communicating to is down, you open it on your phone and it's not working. This is how applications work. And I'm surprised you have all not even analyzed that. Applications are going to work in these two ways. And you were giving me strange answers. But you are all engineers. You are tech gurus. Applications work in these two formats, client and server based. So we have applications which are client and server based, and we have applications which are web based. This is how user is able to communicate with that. So either you are dealing with web based, it means that it will still talk to a server somewhere, but you are having it on a web base, or you are going to have the application working with a client install device communicating to a server somewhere. Guys, don't forget these two things. If you forget this, then I have to even take the certification all back. Derek, you have to send you when even if I'm not like the desktop guys, I don't do desktop, but when I see that they are able to do something, I ask them, how is this possible? How is this possible? If you get application guys, how do you don't need to be there to do everything, but how do people design the application? Are you doing it on what? If I go to the second step and even ask how are application designed, that one you will not even close. So I'll even forget about that. How is application designed? You don't even know about it. Let's all try and question the things we know. But back to my story. What it means is that the ports that you have here, okay, are what identify the applications. The port. That is the duty of the port. The IP address identify the location of the device. The port identify the application. So this company, I know now but it started with INA. Internet Assigned Numbers and Authority. They are responsible for domain names. You can't wake up and say, I'm using collins.com. You can't just wake up and say, you are using it. And then IP address, port numbers, all those things are, right now, it's currently with this organization, ICANN. So Internet Corporation of Assigned Names and Numbers. So they are responsible for all these things. So nobody can wake up and say, I want to do this, I want to do this. So just as we have private IP address and public IP address, in terms of port numbers, this is the range. You can get a firewall questions on this, and you have to know them. And then these are the common TCP ports that we have. So these are common ports that we have. Okay, so as in real life applications that we use on TCP, web browser, email works with port 25, remote desktop, FTP, and all that. Then UDP application, DNS is one. So this port will be common request because most of our services or most of the things we do is going to be email, is going to be this. Then once in a while, you get what we call vendor port. Like for example, I'll ask Abankwa, you should know this. If you guys have been able to design application, there is a port you have registered with that the firewall guys have to allow for the application to work. Because without them allowing that port, it won't work. Okay, so you go to go to command prompt. Let me show you this before we come to that, because the way this guy, so type net starts and bring n. Now this are all the active connections that is going on. So let me show you something. So my local, let me see what my IP address. So my local IP address, this is my PC. It's a self-assigned disk. And then whoever I want to communicate to, whatever services, these are all web. These are 443. This is something else. So these are all web services. Whatever I want to communicate to, then it has to go with a port. So you can't have communication with active connection without IP and port numbers. Are you all following what I'm doing? So if you look here, we have raised like this. Anytime these services want to work, the application, that port should be open. If your company are using Microsoft SQL, this port need to be open because firewall will block anything from outside. It will allow every port. Normally internal ports are open, but from outside to anywhere. For example, let's say Abankwa come and install his application, and we are going to use it for monitoring. I have to know what port the application is working on to be able to open that port. Okay, so that is very, very key. And sometimes you can, we are going to do examples of what you call NAT port forwarding, where you can have one interface, but you forward it to so many ports, which could be like an example of the web-based facing server that I spoke about for static NATs. That could be one of the things that some company can have. So let's say like Abankwa Spoon, if that thing is critical, we can have static NAT with the organization and give them port forwarding on all the port the application is supposed to work on. So that could be one of the scenarios to have that. But these are major developers, and these are the ports they work on. And Abankwa, what port is your company using? Do you know? If you don't know, you have to go and ask. Now you're a firewall guy. What port is it working on?
I have to go and ask, but I know we have interface with Epic, and that works on the 5000 and 5001.
Okay, so we have what we call, so guys look very well. What I'm trying to talk here is system or well-known ports start from 0 to 1023. Then we have port reserved for developers where you register to use it. So if you design a company, or you have a company or a developer, and you have some services, particular services, you have to go and register from here. You have to get one of these port numbers to register to work with your application. And then these are what we call dynamic. So this is what we can say is a private port. So this one is what we use on our computers. So if your computer wants to access application, it has to self-sign itself a port. And that is the reason why you can see that all my private IP address was having different ports depending on the connection that I'm making at that time. So this is my private IP address on this computer. And this is the IP address that it has self-assigned, which is within this range. Okay, and these are the other ports that is meant for something else. So this is also important for interview. You have to know the range of dynamic port numbers. You have to know range of registered port numbers. You also have to know the range of what? Common port numbers. Okay. Any questions so far? Yes, Collins.
Yes, Prof. So if your company is going to get a new service or a new application, for example, at my workplace, we had to get some new scanners, kind of wireless scanners. And of course, we have to talk about opening ports on how they're communicating. Is there something like, I'm trying to understand where exactly you go to open those ports. Already you've talked about opening the ports on the phone. Is there something where it might require you also to do the same thing like on the server with the organization?
On the server side or on the firewall side? Which side are you working on? Are you talking about on the server side or on the which
Oh,
side? Are you
I'm
talking
just imagining because we had a scenario where the firewall guys were saying, "Oh, the port is open," and the network guys were saying, "Hey, we can ping source and destination," but still the application wasn't working. So I'm wondering if the server guys also have to kind of do a port opening on the servers.
Okay, I've had similar situation. It work. Every application is different, and even this one, the man never understood me, and he had to call my boss. My boss joined me to the call, and I told him that look, we've done the network side, we've done the firewall side. How the application is supposed to work is not my duty. So I like now you know how to test when a port is open. So internally the application was internal application, and he said he has to talk to, he get some updates, whatever he was talking about, I have no idea. But according to him, it's not working the way it's supposed to work. But we tested the port was open internally. We could ping the servers, but he's talking about the application not working. Then my boss told him, you know what? Either you remove all those things from the place and bring us a new one, or you forget about it. So you should not worry about that aspect. That is why I said that in network you have to be able to isolate issues. If not, you inherit issues that you can't resolve. So there are things that are hardware related issues, there are things that are vendor related issues, there are things that are related to applications, and then you go and inherit it yourself, and then you don't know what to do. So as a network engineer, as a firewall engineer, all you have to do is allow communication on both IP and the port. That is the reason why I'm giving you the scenario that if I have a client here, let me clean this one now. So if I have a client here and he's supposed to talk to this, allow IP communication to this side, and the IP on the server side or on the firewall side, which side are you working on? Are you talking about on the server side or on the which side?
I'm just imagining because we had a scenario where the firewall guys were saying, "Oh, the port is open," and the network guys were saying, "Hey, we can ping source and destination," but still the application wasn't working. So I'm wondering if the server guys also have to kind of do a port opening on the servers.
Okay, I've had similar situation. It work. Every application is different, and even this one, the man never understood me, and he had to call my boss. My boss joined me to the call, and I told him that look, we've done the network side, we've done the firewall side. How the application is supposed to work is not my duty. So I like now you know how to test when a port is open. So internally the application was internal application, and he said he has to talk to, he get some updates, whatever he was talking about, I have no idea. But according to him, it's not working the way it's supposed to work. But we tested the port was open internally. We could ping the servers, but he's talking about the application not working. Then my boss told him, you know what? Either you remove all those things from the place and bring us a new one, or you forget about it. So you should not worry about that aspect. That is why I said that in network you have to be able to isolate issues. If not, you inherit issues that you can't resolve. So there are things that are hardware related issues, there are things that are vendor related issues, there are things that are related to applications, and then you go and inherit it yourself, and then you don't know what to do. So as a network engineer, as a firewall engineer, all you have to do is allow communication on both IP and the port. That is the reason why I'm giving you the scenario that if I have a client here, let me clean this one now. So if I have a client here and he's supposed to talk to this server, My duty is that I should allow IP communication to this side, and the IP will not be enough. The IP, when it gets to this side, should be able to identify the port that is supposed to work with. So every application on this server has a port they work on. So once you have allowed the port, when the IP take the packet here, his work is done. The IP has nothing to do. It's just to identify location. When it gets to this location, the port number is supposed to identify the application that work with it. So if your application is not communicating to the port, that is a vendor-related issue. That has nothing to do with firewall. It has nothing to do with network. Does that make sense? Okay, good. Okay.
Yes, Prof.
Okay, so if you are all clear with that aspect, why we need NAT, the purpose of NAT, the significance of ports in terms of application, and the reason why I'm taking my time on all this is, if you don't get this logic well, you are not going to be able to be successful in real life. And once you get this logic well, first of all, you have to know what application you are dealing with. You have to know what the way it's supposed to work, what port is supposed to work on, and then through that, you'll be able to manage the situation we are talking about. But in real life, there is this scenario that can be possible. You can have everything DMZ internal or to be public IP address. This, we don't have headache about that. Or you can have a scenario where everything here is private and here is public. So here is public, which is your DMZ network. Everything hosted there is public, and everything hosted here is what? Private. So that scenario is possible. If that scenario is public, we will do NAT for only internal users. We don't do NAT on the DMZ. Are you all getting what I'm saying? But like I'm saying, this is expensive, depending on your organization, depending on how many servers you have on the DMZ, because some company are just for the public, like what this guy is talking about. Their firewall guys, they will have a lot of DMZ services because they are dealing with outside clients. They have so many vendors to deal with. So for them or for a company like this, DMZ will be a huge network. But for an enterprise company, sometimes you don't have so much on the DMZ, so you don't deal with that. So in that situation, you don't worry your head about having what? Public IP address. Do you all get the flow of that aspect? Okay. So once we get that aspect, we are now going to configure